As you would have noticed, we had to pre-record our conversation, my conversation with Alexandra. I made it a little easier for you, different color of the shirt for those of you who have noticed or haven't noticed. Hello, Monika. It's great to have you, and Paulina and Nora. We will now talk about strengthening D&I initiatives and outcomes in a remote setting, and I leave it to you, Monika, to introduce our guests properly and enjoy.
Thank you, Łukasz. Hello, everyone. I'm very honored today to facilitate this conversation on how we can strengthen our D&I initiatives and outcomes in a remote work setting. I would like to ask my speakers to introduce themselves the way they'd like to be introduced. So, Nora, can I start with you, please?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Nora Heger, and I'm a transformation partner for individuals and organizations. I've been doing that for over 20 years now in both my roles. One is at Accenture, in which I'm consulting clients, and I'm also involved in internal inclusion diversity work, and also as a business coach, which I do as a freelancer.
Thank you very much, Nora. Paulina, over to you.
Hello, my name is Paulina Naumenko, and I've been working for Deloitte Central Europe for the past 4 years. My current role is Diversity and Inclusion Senior Manager for Deloitte Central Europe. Previously, I worked in IT department. I am a Humanity in Action Fellow. I graduated from Warsaw School of Economics and postgraduate Gender Studies at Polish Academy of Sciences. And I am based in Warsaw, and I'm calling today from Warsaw, Poland.
Thank you very much. COVID brought us a long-term change, I would say, if not forever change even, in our working mode, working flexibly or working remotely. During multiple lockdowns over the last 2 years, many employees stopped to be engaged or engaged less in initiatives focusing on inclusion and diversity, and many organizations have noticed that change. Additionally, many organizations have changed their priorities of focus and importance of some aspects of diversity inclusion to respond to the changing needs of the employees undergoing crisis global situation. So I would like to start with a question. What impact the pandemic and the remote work had on your inclusion and diversity strategy in your organizations? How did you adjust to it, and what was prioritized in your case? And if I may start with Nora, please.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, the pandemic has impacted us a lot with regards to working remotely, and I would answer your question twofold. So, for our so-called formal diversity and inclusion programs, for example, female leadership development program that we had, I mean, those were obviously then transformed into the remote setting. We didn't go away from our targets, and we didn't fundamentally change the strategy with regards to diversity, but I'd say we have put more emphasis on inclusion. So as I mentioned, we obviously transferred the programs into remote setting, but then our leaders kind of spent an additional amount of time to actually look after the mental well-being of people. Yeah, and because obviously because they cared about their teams, but also because they experienced it firsthand that this situation brought extraordinary challenges with it. So reaching out to people, putting the topic of mental health at the forefront, and also offering support in that, for example, also through internal emotional intelligence program, etc., all were things that we did in order to really don't let that sunk under the table, but really bring it to the table, so to say.
Ladies, my greatest apologies. Apparently, there are so many users that our connection is getting unstable. My greatest apologies. We all got frozen, and I hope that the continuation of our conversation will be more successful. Unfortunately, I was not able to listen probably to the end of Nora's presentation of the best practices, and not sure whether our users could catch everything. But I will move right now to Paulina as for the sake of time. So apologies. Paulina, if you can share your experiences, how you managed the new environment during working time remotely, and what impact it had on IND.
I think this technical break was something unexpected, as many things we actually experienced with the start of the pandemic. So that was one thing. Expect unexpected in the future, and when I think about our actions and what kind of adjustments did we take at the beginning of the remote work setting. First of all, we did some immediate adjustments with respect to, for instance, planning further trainings. Before the pandemic, we were thinking about offline in-person delivery, but then we realized it's not possible. So we needed to adjust all the training materials and make the training as interactive as possible to adjust to this online setting. What else? As Nora said, Nora mentioned that one of the priorities that was being put higher on the agenda was mental health. That was definitely also we already had it in as part of our D&I strategy, but we realized now is the time when it must be really truly prioritized. So, for instance, we introduced employee assistance program with unlimited psychological support. We started building the model to check how our employees are doing. We prioritized leadership involvement in this topic. We started to think about how we can engage our employees in these discussions, how to raise the awareness of mental health issues. I think what was interesting at the beginning is that we became really open to what our employees feel, what are their needs, current needs, and we built the platform to safely share different personal stories, which actually helped me as a D&I manager and the team, and also helped more broadly the whole population, the employees, to understand better different scenarios people were experiencing while working from home.
Thank you very much, Paulina. And when we are talking about remote activities and the way we can interactively involve others in executing on our ID strategy, how did you measure the success? Did you have any tools? Did you have any methods to understand whether you were achieving really the expected results of all your offering? And if I may start this time with Paulina.
Of course. I think this is pretty common to measure how people assess our activities by running the surveys. So obviously, we also did that. However, personally, I treat the survey as a starting point, more or less, and to build of kind of a common understanding, or to start understanding what's in the heads of our people, how they perceive our activities. And what I find really useful, what really works for me, is to take the survey outcomes, analyze them, and then move further and organize some individual meetings with some employees to get this really personal view. And what I was really surprised to learn during the process of having these one-to-one calls is that the screen doesn't have to be really the barrier, and people are really open to share what they truly think about the initiatives, about our successes and spaces for improvement. We just need to be open to listen to them, and then they will be open and share.
Thank you, Paulina. Nora, how did it work in your organization? How did you monitor the effects?
Yeah, so I mean, with regards to diversity measures, of course, the measurement kind of stayed the same. So, for example, the gender ratio was something that we are closely monitoring for years through all the stages of the employee life cycle. So that hasn't changed. Other than that, at least within Germany, we're not allowed to measure too many things with regards to criteria. But of course, we do have kind of proxies and indications that give us a view, and that hasn't changed over the pandemic. What has changed, or what came in for us, is more towards the inclusion measurements. So we actually started, which was also linked to a recent acquisition that we took, to actually measure psychological safety in the different teams. As well as overall net promoter score. I mean, that was something we also did before, but kind of having these different measures from different angles allowed us to, similarly as Paulina said, right, to take up the conversation and really understand where people stand and what's next. Obviously, our leaders also have diversity targets, and that all hasn't changed. Yeah, but that's the way we're tackling it.
Thank you. Today we were talking a lot during all the conference about the importance of listening others. And we are also talking and saying that those that should listen are mainly the managers. In your opinion, what is the role of an inclusive leader in terms of executing on I&D strategy across remote and hybrid working environment? Nora?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to highlight that I&D is not an HR topic, but really, as you say, it's really something that needs to be lived by leadership, by managers, and actually not only by them, but by the whole organization. Yeah, so we always have a saying that we use here, which is it's everyone's job to bring everyone in, and that's the case, right? And everyone should do it according to he or she is able to do it, and within the roles that allow that. So specifically, as I mentioned, for the leadership, it is important, obviously, to raise the expectation that it is something they have to take care of, and that's why we put it into their targets. But more over, so beyond the kind of the pure, for example, gender topic is one of the most visible topics. The topic behind is actually the fact or the question if each and everyone can be what he or she wants to be and really can be themselves. And whatever is helps on people, showing that true self is a good leadership action. And that's, first of all, providing psychological safety, which has a lot to do with providing trust and openness. Also taking, as a leader and manager, not playing the perfect hero who is, perfect all the time, but really also sharing own challenges, vulnerabilities, not knowing it all, really take time to listen, especially in a hybrid setting where we have a situation that some employees might feel closer to the team or to the lead than others who are abroad, so to say. So it is a question of also rotating different locations so that each and everyone gets in different situations all the time, so everyone can feel it and can relate to feelings that some people might have with regards to being disconnected, and then also speak about it. So really make it transparent and give people a chance to voice what they're feeling, and how you as a team can overcome it.
Excellent, absolutely. Paulina, what about your inclusive leaders in your organization?
I think what's really important is to keep repeating that D&I is not just purely part of HR. An inclusive leadership model is something that is very relevant to the current situation. And I think it's important to educate them, to discuss with them, why is it important? Why should we take this unprecedented time as something which is full of opportunities, but also what is important is by inclusive leaders not to overlook some dimensions of diversity, because now we more or less work remotely, like most of our employees, at least in the case of Deloitte, are working fully remotely, but we are constantly preparing ourselves to the time when pandemic is maybe not at the peak or it's finished, let's say, and then we are planning to have a hybrid model, as many companies is planning. And I think what is the risk to address here is not to be too much strict about the new rules and the preference of hybrid model. What I mean is that some people may really prefer to work fully remotely, even when the pandemic is gone. Just to give you an example, caregivers, people with disabilities, students, these are some of the groups of the people that can really benefit from remote work opportunities. And I think it should be offered, of course, to the extent possible, because some professions doesn't allow that, of course. But whenever possible, I think it should be also taken into account by the leaders.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are just approaching the end of our conversation. We have only 3 minutes left. So as for the very end, I would ask you for a conclusion and some kind of cooking a recipe. If you could just give us 2 or 3 best tips on how to cultivate I&D next year, at least in 2022, in a remote or even more hybrid work environment. What would these tips be? Whoever wants.
So first of all, yeah. First of all, I wouldn't call it D&I only, because there's always the risk that people don't feel addressed. Yeah? I'm over exaggerating now, but maybe the male whites, who have been kind of attacked in many instances, might not feel that it's for them, but it's about them as well, right? So I wouldn't call it D&I, but I see it always as the underlying topic is really allowing everyone to be him or herself, and it's not about putting people into boxes, but really catering towards their needs and really listen what the needs are. And we know that even though everyone is kind of equal in one way, on the other hand, we are all different and we do have different needs, right? And so it's for organizations, it's very important to provide that flexibility to, as Paulina mentioned, right? Some prefer a remote setting overall, so why not offering that? What about flexible work models, etc.? And really embedding it in the culture so that people are not stared at, oh, these are the exceptions and they are not ambitious anymore, and that's why they're choosing this or that. I think that's kind of the way we need to tackle it. And I'm always saying, just as an example and specific aspects, but if we achieve that men can work part-time without being looked at strangely, I think then we really have achieved a lot with regards to inclusion and diversity.
Absolutely. Paulina, what is your recipe for cooking great D&I remotely?
I think the recipe for the cook should be that you need to take care of yourself first. We also speak a lot about D&I burnout, and for me personally, this is something related to activism, burnout but simply in the corporate world. And I think if you want to avoid it, we really need to take care of ourselves first, then of the others. That's one thing. Second thing is that we need to keep being resilient in a way that this is a long-term process and long-term journey towards our goal of the inclusive workplace culture. And third thing is that I really want to highlight once again that I would like to encourage you to look at this unexpected with curiosity and look at it as an opportunity, not to be too much afraid of what is going to happen, but rather think about opportunities, new talent pools, hiring people from different locations, experiencing and practicing this inclusive leadership model on a daily basis while being a manager or a leader. So I think this is like full of opportunities, and if we approach it in a good way, in a planned way, a structured way, then we can really see the benefits. We can see the numbers. We can see the culture, which will be different, more open, and we will see the benefits for the company for sure.
Ladies, thank you very much. I deeply regret, but our time is over. So I think the best conclusion is like we are just jumping on a plane. Take on the oxygen mask for yourself. Take care of yourself. Stay open-minded and listen carefully what the others want to share with you. Thank you very much for this inspirational conversation. Łukasz, over to you.
Thank you, Monika. I just wanted to say we don't have time for those questions, but I would certainly like you to hear those questions as inevitably very interesting. Antoni is asking, how can you measure the success of your remote activities? I mean, the impact, not only numbers of attendees, etc. Francine is asking, Nora, how did you measure psycho-safety? Paulina, Nora, can you share more on the diversity targets for leaders? Are they also tackling inclusion and belonging? How do you approach the topic of intersectionality? And Barbara, dear panelists, how do you approach senior leaders who are more resilient to DEI and don't seem to understand the need for it? So these are the interesting questions. I wish we had more time. If you'd like to make a quick comment with reference to those questions, please do.
Maybe I would like to respond to the first question or comment about how do you measure the success of remote activities. Of course, you don't need to look just purely at the number of attendees. You need to ask the attendees for the feedback. You need to ask them for the comments and also for their ideas for the future activities. And it is okay if they come back to you, if they make you accountable, but you can also expect collaboration with them. I think it is crucial to spread this network of D&I champions, of people who actually believe and act upon these values of inclusion. So I think it is definitely possible to measure this impact, also based on the number of people who are visibly support diversity in the company. If you see that then these networks are growing, I think it is also a very positive sign.
One more comment, please, if anyone is interested too.
Yes, I'm happy to comment on how to measure psychological safety or how we are doing it. So it's actually done with a questionnaire that's been developed in close cooperation with the Harvard University, with Professor Amy Edmondson, who is quite well known for that topic. And that questionnaire actually gives a basis, so a baseline also for the teams for further kind of discussion and sharing, which then kind of kickstarts a whole journey towards more trust. But this questionnaire is used over to kind of also see the progress with regards to psychological safety. And there's a whole scientific model behind it. And I think it was Francine. Please reach out if you want to know more, or anyone who wants to know more, right? I mean, feel free to reach out.
You've used a number of metaphors in this conversation. One of them was journey, and that's exactly the topic of our next conversation, a leader's journey to inclusion. So once again, thank you, Monika, for moderating the discussion. Thank you, Paulina. Thank you, Nora.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.